I got to work on that abrupt transition from the music here as we are going live here on a Wednesday afternoon on Rockfin. It's the Short Time Wrestling Podcast, joined today by Stanford head wrestling coach Jason Borrelli. Jason, just saw you down at Little Rock in a quad at one of the newest places in Division I wrestling. So before we get to what's going on with Stanford, Little Rock has been one of those programs that we've been able to kind of rally around and look and see how they did things and starting from scratch. And what were your general impressions of what Neil Arisman's got going on down there?
Yeah, well, it was great seeing you, and thanks for having me on, Jason. But I'm really impressed with Little Rock. I was from afar already, just watching what Neil's been doing, the recruiting, and how competitive the team's got in such a short period of time is impressive. But then you get here and you have a better understanding of why, right? It's a great facility. They've got a lot of support. I mean, just even during this quad, mat side seats had a lot of supporters and donors around watching and staying the whole day, right? Watching 6, 7, 8 hours of wrestling, and just loyal and dedicated supporters. It's great for the state, and really, really hopeful that they keep moving on such a upward trajectory, because could be a real stellar program in the next couple of years. It's got a lot to sell, and looks like there's a community that cares about wrestling, so that's exciting.
Yeah, and you're getting an extended visit there. So right now you are still in Little Rock at the Embassy Suites with the basically, if you look behind you and you've ever stayed in Embassy Suites, for those watching on video, that's the MO. You got the coffee pot down there with the double pot, and then one, you hit the two. One always fills up. The second one only fills up about halfway. So, but you've gotten an opportunity to see at least the inside of the Embassy Suites in Little Rock for quite a while. And I guess kind of the loaded question here is, why are you still in Little Rock? It's Wednesday. You guys wrestled on Sunday.
Yeah, great question. Well, this pandemic has created challenges for everybody. Just so happens that Stanford's in one of the most restrictive counties in the country as it relates to handling the pandemic and how they're responding to it. So we actually, been a lot going on. Santa Clara County, where Stanford is, had some policies in place where it was limiting what you could and couldn't do in terms of contact activity. One of those things was you couldn't have contact activity inside your county, and if you left the county and engaged in contact activity, you couldn't return to the county and resume any contact activity that you were doing, maybe for training. And so we were in a tough spot, right? We're running out of time. Time was ticking to try to get our season going and compete. So we worked out a scenario where we went on the road, what we thought was going to be a minimum of 2 weeks, maybe as long as through our conference tournament, depending on when the county would lift the restrictions. So it was a little bit TBD. We left on the 24th of January, started a trip down in Bakersfield, wrestled Cal State Bakersfield, then went to San Luis Obispo, wrestled a few teams there at Cal Poly, flew out to Little Rock, and we're going to train here for a week until we head to Oregon State, up to Corvallis to wrestle Oregon State and Utah Valley. So we're thankful that Neil and the administration here at Little Rock is allowing us to train for the week as we prep for that. Just so happened, though, a few days into this trip, our county, their guidelines changed and they lifted some of the restrictions. So now we're actually going to be able to go back on the 8th of February, right after the Oregon State match, and we'll get to go back and resume training on campus in our room, which will be nice. So thankfully, it was only a two-week road trip, which we thought could have been a 5 to 6 week road trip. So we're grateful for that.
Yeah, as I was walking out of the Jack Stevens Center the other day, I was talking to Alex. I was like, "What was the last time you saw your couch?" It's like, so, this could have been. I mean, how did you guys prepare for that in terms of like, okay, we don't know how long we're going to be on the road. Classes, of course, are all online, but just mentally preparing your athletes to be like, okay, pack up. We don't know when we're coming back.
Yeah, well, to be honest, we've been training since November. And we've been living in a bubble on campus at Stanford. The guys have been living in a dorm together, all together, suite style living. So they literally are almost all together. And then training, and we had to take our training outside. They shut down indoor contact activity, so we were training outside on turf. It was raining. We had to cover the mats. I mean, it's just been a whirlwind from November through now. We missed, the guys stayed home. They didn't go, no one left for Thanksgiving or Christmas. So it's just been a long time. So our guys were actually, I think, are a little relieved to get on the road and have a new environment and live in a hotel and train indoors, right? A lot of these places we've gone to now, we get to train inside, and that's just been a change of pace because we haven't done that for a month and a half. So they were a little excited. The challenge was just how much to bring, when are we coming back, and not knowing. And the guys handled it really well. They've been pretty resilient all year. No complaints. Nobody complained about any of that stuff. We just said, pack as much as you need. We'll do laundry on the road. So, you probably don't need as much as you think. You think you could be gone for 6 weeks, so you naturally are going to bring a ton. But we just said, bring what you know you need, and we'll make accommodations for laundry and food and all that. And the guys have been great, and it's been awesome. So we're just enjoying being together, having a chance to compete, and training indoors.
Yeah, and circling back to the Little Rock tie, because they are a Pac-12 affiliate, so they have to abide under wrestling under Pac-12 rules. That made things probably a little easier. Say if Little Rock wasn't in the Pac-12, do you think you'd be able to train in their facility as easily?
Yeah, good question. Maybe not. Naturally, right, being a conference affiliate, being able to work with their administration and their athletic trainers has been good. I think the fact that we've been so reliable and diligent with our testing has eased everyone's minds. I think that's the big thing. We're not practicing at the same times as the other team. We're making sure we space it out, and just testing and providing our results daily. Still we stayed with our normal testing cadence. So we test every day. We're PCR testing minimum of 2, but most of the times 3 times a week, and we're antigen testing every day. So that's I think brought peace of mind to the places we've been to allow us to use the facilities.
Yeah, because when I was down there, it was the opportunity. I went in and boom, there's the trainers. I'm getting the shot up the nose with the thing. It's not very comfortable, and I can only imagine having to do that how many times over the course of the last several weeks. It's not very enjoyable.
Yeah, no doubt. It's not enjoyable, but you get used to it, right? You just, okay, shove this darn thing up my nose and swab it around. Interestingly, back on campus, we were able to do some of the swabbing individually ourselves. Since we've been traveling for the most part, the health professionals have been doing that. So, they jam those things up there sometimes further than you'd like, but it works out. And just thankful that we're staying healthy and, practicing good habits on the road, and that our guys are abiding by all the guidelines we've kind of put forth. And it's been great.
Using the whole fist, Doc? It's like, no, thanks. It's a reference. Some of you might get that one. But as we talk about what's going on with Stanford, been on the road, and all of these things that you guys have been dealing with, training outside, how have you been able to kind of work in wrestling practice? And one, a lot of people may be unfamiliar with Stanford. They just assume California. It's not necessarily LA. You're not getting that SoCal weather. You're outside of San Francisco. So weather-wise, what were the challenges, obviously, besides the rain? I mean, temperature, what are Stanford temperatures like during wrestling season?
Yeah, it can be really nice, and it can be overcast and rain, right? Rarely do we get the thunderstorms and the downpours that maybe are familiar in the Midwest or East Coast, but we get rain. So that presents a whole new challenge outdoors. I would say typically we've been practicing about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or 1 o'clock, sometime where it's the warmest, right? Where you're hoping to get the most sunshine. So, and there are days where it's 65 to 70 degrees and sunny, and those days are great because when the sun's shining at 65 to 70, it feels really, really nice. But there are other days where it's 50 degrees and it's cloudy, and that's cold. And if it's raining or drizzling, you obviously can't be on the mat. So we did get creative, and we made 2 outdoor spaces. We had the one open space on the field hockey turf for the days that the sun was shining, and then we had one out at the football stadium in an area that's partially covered. Well, not partially covered; it's entirely covered over the top, but it's open air on one side, but 3 sides are walled off. So we were able to put about a mat and a half in there and hold small group practices, and we just had to split practice times. But those were the days when the weather was bad, if it was raining, or if we had to go in the evening, we would go in there because there were lights. And so then we purchased some space heaters that helped a smidge, and put some space heaters around the mats to keep the temperature up. But I will say, that our guys weren't, that took some getting used to, because you go to wrestling practice, these guys like to sweat, and you're focused, and a lot of these guys lose 4 to 7 pounds of practice of water weight. Well, when we're practicing outdoors and it's colder, it's probably more like 2 to 4, and that just changes the mental psyche and your weight management plan every week. So, but we've worked through it and it's been great.
Not to mention, depending on the material of the wrestling mat you're rolling out there, I mean, it gets colder. Like if some of those mats will get hard as a rock when it's at that temperature.
You aren't kidding. And the opposite, when the sun's shining, when it's 70 and sunny and the mats are really soft and warm, but then it can happen just as quick when the sun goes down and they cool down, they get really hard. So you're right. No doubt.
Yeah, those hot mats are perfect to practice the sit outs because you don't want to get mat returned on. You're like, ah!
Yeah.
Now, when we look at how you coach, how difficult has this been for you with the road trip? I mean, yeah, road trips aren't new, but at least a 2-week road trip, and then you're dealing with the academic rigors of Stanford, compounded by online classes. Everybody's taking classes online, so this has got to be the most unique coaching year you've ever had.
Oh, no doubt. Unique in a lot of ways, right? You talk about the announcement back in July.
Yeah, we haven't even touched on that yet. We're just talking about the competition side of it.
Yeah, dealing with the pandemic and then the guys on the road for the first time taking classes. It's been quite challenging, but in some ways, being on the road is nice. There's a lot of things you don't have to worry about, right? The guys have individual rooms where it's quiet and they can focus on their schoolwork, or they can go sit down in the lobby and be by themselves and have less distractions. Also, it's just they have a lot of things. They don't have to worry about food. We plan that out for them. We're washing the clothes for them. They're taking away a lot of the things that they'd have to deal with if they were back on campus, which maybe is a positive. We're able to shift our workout times either early in the morning or late at night so that they can have class all day. We're not having to juggle worrying about weather. So there's some real positives and perks to being on the road right now in a hotel versus being back on campus. And we're making the most of it. And, I think the guys are responding great.
Now, when we talk about the response, we'll go back to the announcement. And I had Bob Bowlesby on, the former Stanford AD, the current Big 12 commissioner, on the NWCA podcast, or part of the Wrestlers in Business Network speaker series. And he is something that he had championed, is the fact that when he was an AD at Northern Iowa, at Stanford, he's never cut a sport. And now Stanford, which for years was been the gold standard in broad-based athletic programs, Directors Cup championships, every walk of life has the opportunity to compete in sports there. And then we get this sweeping cut of 11 teams, including wrestling. I believe men's volleyball has won a national championship, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, one, how were you informed of the announcement?
Well, I was informed, 20 minutes before the press release was going out.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. I mean, we got an email. We got an email, and I say we, the coaches of the sports that were affected by it. And I will say, backing up, I had no idea. This hadn't been talked about, at least openly or to us, or no one had said us anything about it. And not made a peep. So we were as shocked and as caught off guard as anybody. But we were informed. We got an email, and at the time of the email, I didn't really think anything of it. But my staff wondered, did they need to be on this email? What was behind it? How important was it? It said, important meeting, and we needed to get on like ASAP, like within the next. It was honestly less than 30 minutes. It was when the meeting was coming up, and it was maybe like we got it at a little after 9, and the meeting was set for 9:30, for example. I can't remember the exact times, but and I said, well, let me look into that, and what was interesting was the email had only been sent to a few programs and a few coaches, and that started raising some questions in my head. I was thinking, what's going on? And shortly before that, we had gotten locked out of our social media accounts, and that is what started a discussion between me and my staff. We were texting each other, anyone know why we're locked out? Had no idea. Reached out to our sports information director. She reached out to her supervisor and was kind of told that it's just routine maintenance and that they're doing it for all accounts. And so we kind of brushed that off. But then shortly after that, we got that email, and my coaching staff was included. I thought that was odd. And then right during that, I was getting text messages from our team asking if they needed to attend this important meeting and do we know what it's about. That's what really triggered my mind to think this isn't good, And so ended up having the thoughts that this is not good. Where's this going? And I immediately went into they might tell us they're going to drop our program. And sure enough, we got on the call and they did. And that's how we found out. And it was scramble from there. And what do we do? First reaction we had, and I've had to this day, is that that's not going to happen. We're going to save the program. We're going to find a way to reinstate this. We're going to get the right support. We're going to listen. We're going to figure out why the decision was made. We're going to figure out a better solution. We're going to act on it, and we're going to win this battle. And that was the message from day one to our guys, and that continues to be the message. And I firmly believe that we can make this right.
When we look at the history of Stanford, this isn't the first time it's been dropped. It's not the second time it's been threatened to have been dropped over the course of it. And Stanford has its alumni. Like, we'll look at my alma mater, for example, as we were discussing, and I was talking with Ray about this a little bit. There's not a large history of financial wealth that comes out of a state school like mine, whereas Stanford, this is an elite academic institution. World leaders come from Stanford. So this is, for lack of a better term, kind of an old money type of school, even with the athletics programs. You got Olympians of all walks of life. So initially, where's the first call for you when it says, okay, we need to save this, because this is a school that probably has the financial wherewithal from its alumni base to make a difference. So where's the first call for you?
Well, the first call was to my administration to find out why, because I knew I was going to have to answer those questions to our alumni and supporters. So I wanted to know how this happened. Why were we blindsided? How come nobody knew? How come none of my alumni or donors or any of the supporters of not just wrestling, but all the other programs, why didn't they know? Right. And so I wanted to have a better understanding for that and find out exactly what went into this decision. And, we were told it was two main things. It was finances. It was a financial decision first, exacerbated by a pandemic. And then number two was competitive excellence. They wanted to narrow their focus and narrow the focus and maintain competitive excellence. And, they've decided to focus on 25 sports. And then it was like, well, if it's a financial issue, we'll fix that. And so we went to work within our alumni and supporter group to come up with the financial resources to endow our program. And we're well on our way to that. And then, in fact, we've raised enough money at this point, $12.1 million, toward an endowment, which would completely fund our operating budget and our coaching salaries in perpetuity. The one area we've still got to make ground on is scholarships, and we'll get there as well. But so that was our first thought, was talk to the people that made this decision, figure out why it was made, and then start working to find a solution for those reasons.
And I'm understanding that what everything I've read is the administration took a stance that it was all or nothing. They weren't going to just save one or two programs. It was going to be all 11 or none of them. Has that changed since the initial announcement?
Well, actually, when the initial announcement came out, it was no amount of philanthropy would bring back any of the programs. They were hunkered down, and they said that it's just that they've exhausted that possibility. They've tried and talked to and explored raising the funds, and that wasn't an option, and no amount of philanthropy would bring back the program. So that was interesting.
Well, hold on. If they said they've reached out, if they're trying to raise funds and then they're making this announcement, they clearly haven't reached out to any alumni, because obviously, as connected as wrestling are, nobody can keep a secret in wrestling. So if they tell one wrestling alumni, it's going to get to you probably within a matter of hours, right? If they've reached out to say, oh, we've tried to raise this money and nothing's going to work. So right there, that just seems to raise a red flag to me with the BS that comes from press releases and such.
Yeah, when we pressed on that a little bit, I had those same thoughts. And where they clarified was that they had entertained they had reached out to try to raise $200 million for all 11 sports. So they were looking for donors that had that capacity to fund all 11 sports. And once that wasn't an option, they had to eliminate. They weren't looking at sports individually. They were trying to find a way to save all 11 collectively. And so that's why when we pressed on this, we got them to at least be open to, well, if we can come up with the amount of money that it takes to endow all 11, is that an opportunity for return? And they said, of course, but that value is is a little bit ridiculous. $200 million for 11 sports first is not even an accurate number. We've dug into this, that it wouldn't take that amount of money to endow those sports. Many of the sports that they cut already have endowments behind them, and so it would be a lot less than that. But beyond that, we also tried to dig onto the issue of, well, if we could solve our own financial issue, wrestling, and solve your gender equity issue, right? If we were not a financial burden to you and we solved your gender equity issue, can we exist? And we got a lot of pushback originally on that, but we finally got them to at least say that if we can do that, they would have to entertain and hear that and listen to it. They wouldn't guarantee anything, but they would listen to that solution. And so that was positive too when we got that news. But then as we've gotten into this more, it's gone back to all 11 or nothing. That's where they kind of are. It's like all 11 or nothing. We're not gonna pick sports off and bring them back individually no matter what. And so we've all united, right? And it's gone from most, it was Keep Stanford Wrestling, a little Hunger Games. We were kind of every program for themselves, to where now we need to be together, and not just the 11 sports that were cut, but we've got a ton of support from all of the alumni and donors and supporters of the other 25 programs. There's actually a group out there called 36 Sports Strong, and they represent all 36 sports, and they're very, very outspoken and trying to get in the ears of the right decision makers and the key influencers, and stand by and support us collectively as a group. And so that's kind of been our focus moving forward.
Your dad's been around college athletics for a very long time. Coming through, he's coached at programs that no longer exist. And how much have you reached out to him for maybe some advice on what he's seen over the years? I mean, Central Michigan has dropped some sports. Wrestling dodged that bullet there. But what have the conversations been like with your dad about all this?
Well, I talk to him regularly. So I was with him for the 2 weeks when this first happened. I was actually on vacation in Michigan. Didn't get to see him for 2 weeks because I ended up being locked down in a basement, just dealing with this 24 hours a day. It felt like for about 15 straight days. But I have been able to talk to him. He's obviously supportive. He's not been at a place when the program was cut, because I think when he had left Clemson and they dropped years later. He was at Lake Superior State in Division II, and they dropped after he left. But he has been at CMU when they've gone through decreasing sports. When his first year or two he was at Central Michigan, it actually came down to deciding between men's soccer and wrestling, and they ended up cutting soccer and keeping wrestling. And then not that long ago, back in the summer, or maybe it was early or late spring, I can't remember, they cut the men's track program. They actually dropped below the minimum number of men's teams, and then had to get a petition from I think they had to get a waiver. Sorry, they had to petition for a waiver from the NCAA to allow them to be below the men. So he's been a little bit involved. His advice is that it's really important to fight for the things you believe in, and if you believe in opportunities, if you believe in the collegiate athletic model for what it should be, opportunities and how. What it stands for and why it exists, you need to fight for it, and don't be shy. And I'm trying my hardest not to be, to stand up for what I think is right. And I think, I'll continue to do that. So.
One thing it's kind of hard to be as a coach. We've seen coaches, and again, going back to my alma mater, Steve Martin hasn't made a single public comment. Basically it's either an NDA or it's they hold the pension hostage or something along those lines, where some coaches can't speak out. You've had the opportunity to at least coach through a final season, and you're doing interviews, you're talking about things. What are some of the things that are hardest for you as a coach to not necessarily anger the people you're trying to get, keep your job, for lack of a better term, but also tell the truth out there and let people know this is what's going on?
Yeah, I would say, well, first off, this is not about me at all, right? This is about 115 years of history. It's about the sport of wrestling that I believe in. It's about collegiate opportunities, which I believe in. And it's about the model that I think is broken and needs fixed. It's about our alumni, our supporters, and probably most true to or close to me, it's about our current student athletes and the guys on this team that were promised things by either me or by this university, and they're being taken away, right? And I feel terrible about that. And so it has nothing to do with me and my family. I feel confident that we'll land on our feet regardless, but it's just, I don't think it's right. And so I'm going to fight for that. So I would say what's difficult Not much, because I believe so much in that, and I'm doing this for the good of a sport, for the good of people, for others. And I'll be factual, things that really happened. That's all. Like, my thing is if people ask me, I'll just tell them yes or no, or I'll tell them things that were told to me. And as long as it's factual and accurate and not making things up, I feel like that's the right way to do things. So
Some of the common arguments that we as a wrestling community have when a sport is threatened is we talk about enrollment driven, we talk about first generation college students, we talk about diversity. You don't really have that enrollment driven thing, because if you get rid of those 11 sports, there's not going to be this empty seats. There's a wait list. Stanford's extremely prestigious, so you lose that argument a little bit in terms of the tuition money generated from the non-scholarship athletes. They'll just be replaced. But we look at the diversity angle, and Stanford wrestling, I think, what was it, the fencing team or one of the other teams, is also extremely diverse. And this is not a good look for a school like Stanford to say, to wave the flag of equality and diversity and such, and then cut some of your most diverse sports, including wrestling. I mean, statistically, you guys are way up there compared to your peer sports there.
yeah, no doubt. Actually, we looked into this at the beginning to see where we stood in terms of diversity. So we actually reached out to the admissions office, Office of Financial Aid and Undergraduate Admissions, to get some data from them to figure out from kind of first generation, low income, to see their diversity numbers. And that was an area where we're performing, well, at least over the last 15 years, where we could collect data from almost 3 times the university's percentages, right? So of first gen, low income. And obviously, you can look at other types of diversity too. You can look at, the amount of Hispanic participation, Black participation, whatever group you want to look at. And every team has its kind of wheelhouse in that area. But for us, first gen and low income, really, really high. We deal with a lot of first generation college students and a lot of low income. And I think I don't have the statistics right in front of me, but I want to say over the past 15 years or so, we were at like 44 or 46% of our roster qualified under the terms of what the university deems first gen or low income. And I think that the university's rate is like 17%. And so, we're almost tripling that, which is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I believe the Stanford student paper did a really, really good job at exploring that. I think I'd read that as well. And then some of the athletes on your team, like Flo and some others had the Real Woods mini documentary, I guess you could call it. And this kid's backstory is like, one, it's what wrestling's made of, and two, it's like kids like that can get to Stanford. I mean, just touch on Real story a little bit and what makes him kind of maybe somebody to look at and be like, this is why Stanford needs wrestling. Kids like this.
That's exactly right. I mean, Real's an amazing, amazing human being. And his story and his journey to Stanford was remarkable. And it's exactly the reason why we feel great about this sport. And as coaches, you relish in the moments when someone like that gets this opportunity, and to see it ripped away from him is heartbreaking, because I know what he sacrificed and I know what he's gone through in his family to give him this opportunity. And now I know how much it hurts to see it being taken away. But there's going to be more of him. There have been Real Woods before, right? There have been stories before, and there will continue to be more after, but not if we don't have a program like the sport of wrestling here to help be that kind of that way in, and that's the other thing that makes this really hard. So yeah, you can watch that. It's remarkable, the things he did, the sacrifices he made, and it shows the type of person he is. And he set his mind to something, and how hard he was willing to work and what he was willing to give up. And same for his family, and to get here and to have everything going great, and be doing so well, right? Adjusting so well. He was doing fantastic in the classroom, was off to a great start on the wrestling end, and just everything seemed to be going great. And then bang, with no notice, no idea, and just to be blindsided is tough.
Yeah, and we touched on a little bit, and not talking about the competitive aspect of this season nearly as much as this is a fact finding or update on keepstanfordwrestling.com, but you were telling me this kid is loading up the credits right now, because with wrestling in limbo the way it is, the degree from Stanford is super important to him. Explain kind of how his academic rigors have been this season, and will we expect to see him at all?
Yeah, so I've kind of mentioned this, that this has affected everyone differently on our team, and we're trying to be just as supportive as we can for everyone's individual needs through this. And one of the things that was really tough is guys that were entering their third year were in a spot where they do have an opportunity to try to earn their undergraduate degree and then transfer after this season if they're going to go to grad school, right? And so Shane Griffith, Real Woods, that class who would be in their third year right now, right? They both redshirted, so they're sophomores eligibility, but they're third year students. Some of those guys, a lot of them are trying to really load up and take as many units as they could in the fall quarter. So we're a quarter school, so not a semester school. So we get we get 4 quarters: the fall, the winter, the spring, and then the summer. And then hopes to try to finish their undergraduate degree and then transfer the following year. Real's one of those. He's really loaded up because you come into school and you think you're on a 4 or 5 year track, so you're not overloading on units every quarter. You're taking what you need to, one, be eligible, but two, to just balance having not too many, but taking enough or whatever. And so because you're thinking my plan is 4 or 5 years, well, all of a sudden his plan became 3 years because he wants to get his degree in 3 years, and so that's changed the amount of courses he's had to take, and he's taking a lot, and that's top priority for him, as it should be, right? Getting his degree. And we're trying to figure out and work with him on a way to get that degree, but also wrestle and be mindful of what we ask of him, right? What we have him do and don't do. And so we'll see how the next few weeks shakes out. But I remain optimistic, as I am all the time, that the plan will come to fruition and things will work out. But top priority is him graduating.
And academically, how many wrestlers have you had come through graduate in 3 years?
Maybe one that I can think of.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, really tough. I mean, those that class in particular, and where this is equally as like just hard is, freshmen and sophomore really don't have an opportunity. If they're going to stay and graduate, they're going to give up eligibility because they're gonna have to stay here and lose eligibility on the back end. Really, the only people that have a viable option to not burn eligibility are third and fourth years or fifth years, right? Because they have opportunities to finish their degree and then go to grad school if this isn't successful. But it's going to be successful. We're going to keep the program, so then everything's going to be all right. But because we don't make that decision and we don't know the outcome, they need to be smart and they need to try to get their degree. Where I really feel awful is for the freshmen who chose this university, chose to come here under one, thought process. They had no reason to believe the program might not be here in their career. So they chose to come here. Now they're freshmen and it gets ripped out from under them. And it's almost like, do you go somewhere else? Do you stay here and just give up wrestling and continue on to get your degree? And those are decisions they're going to have to make, and we'll help guide them and give them our advice and work through it. But the third, fourth, and fifth years, they're going to get a chance to get their degree.
And some of that might be eased a little bit because of the way COVID has kind of given this a free year in terms of eligibility. So that eases the sting maybe a little bit if things go, off the cliff completely. But when we look at back to being able to make this thing financially solvent, so these guys don't just they don't lose their eligibility. They don't lose their team. The freshmen are there. Part of that was the implementation of the plan for women's wrestling, and Patricia Miranda was an Olympian that wrestled for Stanford. Matt Gentry was an Olympian for Canada. So there's Olympic hopefuls that have come through, and then the women's wrestling aspect of it. How much of that is crucial to this whole element, and for people like Patricia, what's her involvement been?
So a couple questions in there. First and foremost, Patricia has been very involved. She's one of the co-chairs of Keep Stanford Wrestling, the committee, and is working tirelessly on this and fighting, is passionately and as hard as any wrestler you would expect to fight for something they believe in. So really grateful to have her support. She's awesome. But the women's component, I would say I feel like we've missed the boat at Stanford. We should have had a women's program already, to be honest with you. women deserve opportunities in the sport of wrestling at the collegiate level, and California has a tremendous amount of girls involved in the sport at the youth level. Same with the boys, right? At the high school level. So I wish we had started a women's program sooner. Of course, we don't control that, right? Those are decisions made above us and by the administration. But we feel like women's wrestling is long overdue at Stanford anyway, and it's just the right thing to do. And so we made this a part of our reinstatement efforts for the men's team. We want to add a women's team. It's the right thing to do, but we also know that it could help in other ways. Obviously, there's the gender equity balance, and it solves some other issues as well. It's not that expensive, because if you have a men's program, you can have a lot of shared costs, right? You already have some of the coaches, you can have the facilities already there. It's just a lot of shared costs. So it's very cheap once you have a men's program, and it's just, quite frankly, it's the right thing, and it's long overdue. And we need Division I women's programs. And I'll champion that cause as much as I can. Once I'm, maybe I can do a better job of that now, but I'm fighting for this program, the men's program, and worried about the season. But I'd love to start helping out, fighting for women's collegiate opportunities as well.
Yeah, and we look at those women's collegiate opportunities now that the emerging sports status has been, granted in all three, Division I, Division II, and Division III. That argument is a lot easier to make to your administration, whereas 5 years ago, it's not an emerging sport. There's no Division I schools with it. We've got Presbyterian, Sacred Hearts added. Lock Haven's a Division II school with Division I men's wrestling. So the opportunities are growing, and they're waiting. We're waiting for that Power Five. Why not Stanford? Why not spin this around? And it just seems logical to be like, okay, well, we look bad right now. We can really turn this into positive if we're bringing on women's wrestling, and we're the first Power Five school to bring it on. So that's one thing that somebody's going to be the first. Why not Stanford?
That's right. That's exactly right. Someone's got to be first, so why not us? And that's kind of my mindset with this. It's you either want to be first, better or different, right? And let's be the first, and let's be better than everyone. Let's be different than everyone, but let's be the first at something, and could be the first. So I'm right with you.
We will look at what's moving forward now, as terms of how the guys are relating to it. Real's not in the lineup. Shane Griffith, you had mentioned him. He's going to be in the lineup. You got a lot of questions about him as he's nursing, I believe, just an injury. He'll be back on the mat soon, based on what we had talked about in Little Rock. But how do you keep your kids' heads up, knowing this may be their last year? You talk about those freshmen who may never have another chance again. I mean, how much does that wear on you as a coach, and how many more gray hairs is it giving you?
Be honest with you, we approach this year like it's no different year. I think we're going to be here next year, right? I really do. People, for whether that's good or bad, that's just my mindset. So everything we're doing, right? We train, the expectations are the same. How we hold the guys, being accountable, like the things we're doing are all in preparation for, these guys being with us moving forward. So nothing's really changed in that way. I think the guys' spirits have stayed high for a number of reasons. One, our alumni have done such a great job of spearheading this effort and keeping everybody up to speed on what's going on. It brings everyone great ease of mind and confidence that there are people working tirelessly behind the scenes to fight for them. So our guys don't have to worry about that. They don't have to worry about, are we going to raise the money? Are there people talking to the right people? Are there people, doing the right things behind the scenes? Our alumni have joined Zoom calls and told them all the things we're doing. We keep our guys up to speed. And so our guys know that fight is happening. And so for them, they can just relax and focus on school, training, and competing. And that's really what we tell them, just focus on that. Let us worry about the rest. You take care of business. That's the best thing you can do, is just, put your head down, work hard, do the right things in the classroom, and we'll take care of everything else.
Stanford being unique in the situation where the type of student that enrolls that typically looks at Stanford isn't necessarily the type of student that looks at, say, a Fresno State, not disparaging their academics in terms of the people that want to go there, but you've got two schools in California that are on the block right now. And how important, I guess it's kind of obviously a loaded question, but when we look at the importance of these two programs in California, why is it vital for not just Stanford, but also for Fresno State to stay alive. And have you had any conversations with Coach Steiner about their situation?
Yeah, I've talked to him a little bit. I think it's really important that we keep both those programs out west. One, for the fact that the footprint, right? We need more collegiate programs. There's a lot of great wrestling on the West Coast, boys and girls, men's and women's. So Washington, Oregon, California, Arizona, Nevada. I mean, there's good wrestlers in those states, and they need opportunities to compete and to get an education for all the reasons we've already discussed. Some it's their end to getting a degree and changing their life, right? And going on to some of them become future leaders in the world. And we need it. We need it for. We also need it because what worries me the most is that if you're at a smaller school, smaller budgeted school, or smaller athletic department in terms of visibility, and you're looking and you're kind of looking at the landscape and what's going on, and you're out west and you see a place like Stanford drop the sport, you start probably questioning whether or not you should have the sport in your athletic department. It's human nature, right? And you start thinking about, well, who are we going to compete against now? And it's going to cost us more money to go places and compete. And I view this as, with Stanford and Fresno not existing, just crippling wrestling in the West. It really will, because it's going to be that much harder for universities of lower budgeted to have places to compete, and they're going to have to spend more money, and they're going to then be thinking twice about whether or not that's the right sport in their athletic department. And I really worry about that. And so we need to rally together. We need the community to come together, and we need to make this right and keep Stanford and hopefully Fresno State as well, right? I wish I could speak more to that. I know Troy's, I think they're getting going. They've got some alumni behind their effort. I have talked to him, and I want to help as much as I can. But my focus right now has been on our program. But to the extent we can help piggyback this together, maybe we need to do that as well.
Yeah, as we look at the KeepStanfordWrestling.com page and the audible applause from the only event this year that some of your parents could even show up with. You got a lot of Georgia kids on the team. So not that far of a trip over for them to Little Rock, but a very vocal group that are behind this effort as well. Not just the alumni, but the current parents, obviously, because their kids are wrestling. But on the website, KeepStanfordWrestling.com, things you can do to help. But what else besides what we've got on the website out there can people do that aren't necessarily Stanford alums or directly tied to the program that they can do to help?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah, you've got the things up there. My biggest thing is the let people know, right? Let people know how this affects so many people. I think when you think about anything, anytime you're trying to have a movement or power comes in numbers, right? The more people you can get behind your cause. Yes, money helps, right? Money helps. We've all know that, right? The more money you have, the more things you can do, but your voice can matter so much, right? Write a thoughtful letter, talk to the decision makers, let our president, our provost, the board of trustees members, our athletic director know how important wrestling is, or sports. This doesn't even have to be about wrestling. This can be about collegiate sports. This could be about the model because you're worried about, you have kids, I have young kids, and I'm worried about future opportunities for them because the models seems to be broken, right? We're spending way too much money. We're chasing the facilities arms race in all these sports, and the model is not sustainable unless something changes. And we're all worried about that. I'm worried about it. I think so much in sports, and I feel like we need collegiate opportunities, but I am worried of what it's going to look like in 10 or 15 years unless we start voicing that concern and demanding a change. What would incentivize people to change, right? We have to make that.
We talk about situations where you've got boosters that are paying football coaches in Power 5 conferences not to coach, and it's like, well, why couldn't just a little bit? Why wouldn't they put that money towards maybe I don't know, the new pool that School X has been needing, or hey, it's not that, it's basically a line off your tax write off or whatever. It's just frustrating. But when we look at Stanford and the landscape of wrestling, and we look at the future, I'm really questioning why. I guess you're asking the same thing, because when I was at Stanford a couple years ago, you guys brought me out to announce the Pac-12 tournament. I got the feeling that what wrestling was welcomed there, not just from the administration who brought me in, the people that run the facilities and took care of the event. Treated me great. I mean, I couldn't have asked for anything more. It was a fantastic, it was a beautiful campus, beautiful area, great spots to eat down there near the farm. And I'm just like, and then the Pac-12 office sits there staffing. And I'm like, these people generally seem to care about wrestling, yet we've seen Oregon drop. We've seen the affiliates like Boise State drop. We've seen, Arizona drop briefly, for 10 days in 2008. I don't understand how this conference that seems to love wrestling and seems to have administrators that at least give a good interview about how they respect wrestling don't want to move it forward. Whereas like the Big 12, they took on the Northern Colorados and the Utah Valleys because according to John Smith, they wanted to help wrestling and grow wrestling. How does the Pac-12 miss that boat? Or is it all just lip service? Do you think do they really care about the sport?
I do think they do. I think people within I think there are people at the Pac-12 that do. And I know a few of them that really care, and they've been a big part of the last few years, kind of the uptick that I felt and you felt, and probably a lot of people have seen, so trying to do the right things, looking at lifting our affiliate membership. This coming year was going to be the first year we were going to be able to put out offers and try to bring new affiliates in. There had been some clauses in place for a long time that prevented that. And we had some new executive and leader, upper leadership team people that were fighting for us and helped change some of that. And so there was a lot going on. And I think, I felt the same things you felt. And I felt like at Stanford, I never felt threatened. I never felt like things weren't going great, and no one had ever given any indication that we needed to do this better. We needed to do that. It was super supportive. We had continued to get a little bit more each year to help the program. We had a lot of funding needs that we needed anyway. And so it just genuinely seemed like everything was good. And then to have this happen was shocking, right? It was absolutely shocking. And it really puts a dent, particularly because the place that Stanford plays within our conference, within the Pac-12, right? We win a lot of championships, and we're a big, big, big part. Not that every team in the Pac-12 isn't, but Stanford is just a big part of that. And so when we dropped and when we cut a sport like wrestling and the other 10 sports, it makes everyone sit there, scratch their head. And it really worries me, because now I don't know what's going to happen within the Pac-12 if we can't get this right.
Yeah, I feel it's irresponsible when, you kind of touched on how you guys were initially every man for himself, Hunger Games, to becoming a cohesive unit. When School A drops a sport, it doesn't just impact School A. It impacts School B, C, D, E, F, all the way down to, double A if you're on Excel. It's like you impact everything. It's a domino effect. You can't just say, well, it doesn't work for us. Well, how about your peer institutions? That's one thing I think it's irresponsible when those discussions aren't even held. Outside the conference, for example, like, okay, you've got Oregon State, Stanford, and Arizona State as the 3 core Pac-12 schools. Okay, there's 12. There's 3 that got wrestling. I mean, I just, again, preaching to the choir here where the frustration exists. And I just, again, the affiliate, you touched on the affiliate question, but we weren't that long ago where Portland State was an affiliate. Fullerton was an affiliate. We had Boise. We had Cal Davis. It was an 11-team conference that was putting guys in the national finals. I mean, Derek Moore at UC Davis is their only All-American in school history to win a national title. And those stories can exist. Like schools like Davis and guys like Derek Moore are important to the California guy. I think he was 4th once. I mean, those stories are up and down the state. And I feel, I guess I feel like Stanford, maybe you guys are in a little bit better perch than some places, because when you're state funded and you can deal with taxpayers, or you can deal with the private folks that have the money, the board of visitors, board of governors, whatever they're called. That's just my little 2 cents on it. So as we wrap up, any final thoughts on what you guys are looking forward to heading into the season? Maybe sleeping in a bed that's more familiar than, I will say the Embassy Suites beds are pretty comfortable, but what's the stretch run going to look like for you guys?
We're looking forward to getting back and training in our wrestling room. That's going to be exciting, but also I'm really excited to have a postseason. I really want to get through the finish line this year and get to the NCAA tournament and be excited and relieved when that happens. We have some guys that have very, very lofty goals. We have a good young team. I mean, the future of our program is very bright. Thought that last year. Was super excited going into our national championship, and of course didn't have the chance to compete. But feel the same way this year. The future of our program is really, really bright, and excited for the guys. I'm excited that we're now competing. That if we do the right things and handle our own business and are safe and are smart, that it looks like we're going to get through the finish, and that's exciting. So, but I would say in the short term, looking forward to Oregon State and Utah Valley this weekend, finishing out our regular season, and then getting to train in our Stanford wrestling room that we take great pride in. We raised a lot of money for that just about 5 years ago to renovate. And it's a beautiful facility, new locker room, and can't wait to get back in there and kind of be back surrounded by the walls of greatness, all the great alumni we've had. To be looking at them every day will be quite fun. So.
Yeah, and on Twitter, it's let's bring up the account real quick. Keep Stanford Wrestling on Twitter, because you guys aren't just locked out of your Twitter. You're still locked out, and there was the tweet out there that it kind of explained it, that you're going to do your own thing with Keep Stanford Wrestling. So that's where you're following at Keep Stanford Wrestling. That's the updates. That's the program highlights. You guys are decked out in that gear, black singlets. Stalemates touched on that a little bit. Little callback to Bakersfield a couple years ago, and William and Mary, which when they dropped in '91 or announced it, the coach went to his old high school. They were black. They were Kellum Knights, wore some black singlets. So it seems like black is the singlet color of protest. So we've got that out there.
Yep. Yeah. We're just supporting our guys and trying to get better at wrestling.
That's what we got. So, Coach Borrelli, appreciate the time, and I'd say enjoy Little Rock if you can get out there. There's some good barbecue places. I know that if you get an opportunity for some carryout, I recommend it. If you like, spicy fried chicken, you got Gus's down there downtown. There's a couple good spots. I've enjoyed my time in Little Rock, and hopefully you can see everything more than just the inside of that Embassy Suites.
Great. Thanks for having me on, Jason. Appreciate it.